Yeah, all good.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for coming. I mean, would it be possible, you've just done, some of you have done a quick introduction. Would it be possible for those that haven't spoken just to tell me a little bit about who you are before we go any further? Sarah, perhaps, I know you joined, I haven't.
Yeah, so I'm recruitment manager for Bailey Group.
Okay. Anybody else who's on the call that hasn't spoken yet? Gillian?
I'm Gillian Pringle. I work for NHSX.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else I might have missed? Well, thank you all for coming. The subject that we're going to be chatting through, and a bit of a whistle-stop tour really, is looking at winning the war for talent in the digital sector. Just a little bit about me and you know, and why Hayton's asked me to come along, apart from the fact that I am familiar to them and we do share an office. But I run a company called HR Alchemy. We're based in Middlesbrough in the same building as you know with Hayton. But I, for most of my life, was HR director and also a board member within the steel industry. I had a change when I lost my job in 2015, when the company I was working for went into liquidation. And since then, I've built up HR Alchemy, and we've got over 100 clients in the Northeast. And we look after a lot of the digital and tech sector in Teesside, a lot of the gaming sector, and which is quite an exciting area. And so having spent quite a bit of time with those guys, I thought it was appropriate that, you know, we maybe focus this talk today just combining my 24 years in HR really with just some of the tips that I can maybe suggest going forward for you guys who may be looking to retain and attract within that sector. But once we've finished the slides, maybe at the end, if you've got any questions, please feel free. And like I say, I will be sharing these slides as well. So hopefully you've got something to go away with at the end as well. Does that sound okay for everybody? When I've timed this, it's going to be about half an hour, give or take a bit, depending on questions. So please let me know, you know, at the end if you've got any questions that you'd like me, or slides that you'd like me to go back to. So, whistle-stop tour on the 5 top tips. You know, I can't go into all of these in as much detail as perhaps I'd like, and I would just like to say that I am working from home at present, as a lot of people are, so if there are any noises in the background, I do have a puppy who's very excitable, so I do apologise. But I've tried to give her enough things to play with while we're talking. So, using my experience in HR, really I'm going to be trying to share with you some tips on how you can gain some significant advantage in the war for talent, particularly within the digital sector, and looking at what we can do to help various businesses. But this is just some kind of killer headlines really, in terms of recent survey data I've come across while putting this presentation together, that 90% of companies lack digital skills, which is a shocking statement in itself. And you know, in spite of that kind of bold killer statement, only 46% of companies are actually investing in digital skills, which means 54% aren't. And that was a 2009 Wired survey. And only 4% are aligning their training strategy with their digital strategy, which is absolutely worrying. And the point is that as new roles emerge, our skills requirement are just not going to meet the demand of what we've got in terms of digital resource. Now, I take into respect, you know, the fact that at the minute things are very, very different, but I'm going to cover this in a later slide. I do think you know, the recent situation of the pandemic has actually brought about a whole greater demand in terms of the digital skills that are required in the market, because people are looking to work from home and use digital skills to their fullest in a very different way than perhaps pre-pandemic they weren't. There's also going to be a massive shortage of people in data science and AI, and you won't just simply be able to fall back on hiring new employees to future-proof this. You know, there is undoubtedly going to have to be a look internally at what you've got internally in terms of talent, and that's where I'm going to spend a bit of time talking today in terms of developing and future-proofing your business. This was just an interesting slide from a Future of Jobs survey in 2018 about where the proportion of companies who are looking to recruit tech skills are likely to adopt them in the next couple of years. Now, I'm not a techie, I'm not, you know, digitally, can't talk about a lot of that, but, you know, if you look at kind of big data analytics at 85%, you know, there's huge demands here in terms of the technologies, you know, you know, the internet, cloud computing, where there's going to be a demand for skills. And as I've just mentioned, in The Economist, they said that one of the most obvious consequences of the pandemic is, you know, whilst we've got some huge demand coming in terms of the skills that are required, the actual change and infusion of what those data-enabled services that we now need by working at home, you know, and the changes that the pandemic's created is probably giving us an even bigger imperative for organisations in the short term to look at their digital skills. So that's just a little bit about the scenario. We'll come on to the tips that I'd like to share based on my experience. So firstly, and I've mentioned this very briefly, looking at your internal talent. You know, I don't know in your organisations how often you do this. You know, do you even know what internal talent you've got? I know a lot of my clients, they tend to focus very heavily on the graduate intake that comes in, getting them up to speed, and that's where a lot of their investment and training tends to go into that pool of resource. Well, what about your existing employees? What about your you know, long-serving employees that have been with you, perhaps doing a very similar job from the beginning, but how often do you look at you know, where their skill sets, where their interests are, how can you focus and best focus on them? And I come back to what I said in one of my earlier slides, you won't simply be able to fall back on hiring new employees to future-proof your workforce. You are going to have to look internally. And that's one of the tips that has got a theme through these 5 recommendations today. So firstly, I would ask you to really think carefully about what your internal talent. And secondly, in doing that, you need to have the right data on those individuals to support that. And what do I mean by data? You know, question I always ask clients, do you regularly have one-to-ones with your employees? Vast majority of people, too busy, don't have time. It's one of the most interesting sources of information that you can have in terms of what your employees are doing, where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, how fulfilled they are, what objectives they're working to at the moment. A lot of clients just go, well, we'll do an annual appraisal exercise and it's a box ticking exercise. And actually I'm like, well, throw your appraisal exercise out the water. Let's go back to doing something regularly with your teams. you know, I can provide you with a very simple kind of one-to-one kind of coaching form to develop with them that really just looks at some short-term objectives, some longer-term development plans, and just making sure that these are regularly monitored with the individual. And, you know, in the generation that we're recruiting amongst at the moment, is this career the best fit for them? You know, or do they feel that their interests and abilities are kind of hampered by the role that they're currently doing? And do they have some interest in other areas that you need to be aware of and that you could be looking at in terms of their development? Again, regularly monitoring what they're doing and how they're performing, absolute basic, but actually where are their strengths, weaknesses, interests? That's really important as well. And working from home has given us this ideal opportunity to invest in people. You know, during the recent periods of furlough, and I know that's coming to an end shortly, but you know, you were able to do training during furlough. You were able to offer that to your employees. I did with some of my team. You know, it's an opportunity that really you might not ever get again, where they're being paid by the government to do training that you could be accessing and delivering to them. And also one-to-ones on Zoom. You know, this is an opportunity to, whilst you can't necessarily always be in the office with them, it's an opportunity to schedule a regular one-to-one and have a chat. It's away from the office, it's in a private space. And what do you do with that information once you've got it? You don't just kind of stick it in a file and forget about it. You know, there has to be some recording of that information that feeds into their personal development. You know, it's no good having an HR department if you're lucky enough to have one. If not, having a small business that maybe does all the right things but actually doesn't record anything and doesn't have that information to hand. Because good management and keeping your employees, you know, retaining your employees is all about having good data about them, good information, and being accurate, and actually being embedded in just the process that this is how we behave, this is how we treat our employees. We meet with our employees once a month or however for a one-to-one. This is just what we do because this is the business that we are. We are interested in our employees. We don't just wait till once a year to do a box ticking exercise for an appraisal. We do that and we know what our employees, how they're performing, and what their ambition, what their aspirations are. And then once you've got information, you are able, and good information, good data, you are able to develop a talent strategy. Now, I'm going to share with you something that I use all the time as a talent strategy. And there's 9 boxes on there quite deliberately. And for those of you who may have come across this before, it's called a 9-box grid. So it's not got a kind of very complicated title. And if you've come across this and you're well au fait with it, then that's great. But for those that aren't, just a quick few slides about it. Essentially, I would challenge you to look at all of your employees in your organisation, especially with regards to digital skills, which is what we're here to talk about, and put them in one of these boxes, okay? So down one side we have potential, along the other axis we've got performance, and essentially you need to look at what you've got and say, have I got low performers with high potential, or have I got a low performer with moderate potential, or a low performer with low potential, okay? Or have I got a moderate performer with high potential, a moderate performer with moderate potential, or a moderate performer with low potential? Or have I got a high performer who's just knocking out the park and is an absolute high potential for the future? I've got a high performer with a moderate potential, or have I got a high performer with a low potential? And you need to look and you need to fit your employees into one of these boxes. And by having good data, you can do that. And then I'm going to challenge you to go, okay, I'm going to strip this box down and I'm going to go, okay, these guys who are at the top side of my 9-grid box, I am going to invest in looking at their training and development. Doesn't mean to say I'm not going to look at the other guys in the other boxes, but these are the ones you need to be focusing on, because these are your high potential people who you, with a little bit of push, could be kind of taking your business to a different level. And these are the guys that you can invest in, develop a development plan, a training plan, which will mean that you retain those skills going forward. And these are the ones that really are going to be the future. The other guys who fall into the other boxes, you may be able to help push into those boxes in time. But if I'm going to give you a tip today, it's initially focus on these guys, because these are the guys and girls that are really going to be the future for your business. I'm also going to say, as part of this, that a low performer, low potential, you need to be exiting. You need to be looking at that, the people that fall into those boxes, and however harsh it sounds, if they aren't going to be, if they've got low potential and the performance isn't great, then you may be able to help push them slightly along the journey. But you know, once you've tried that, if you're not yielding any results, then my advice to you is, however harsh it may sound, is that you get some good advice and you do what you can to exit those people from the business. So, in summary, your strategy is absolutely critical about how you develop your internal talent, and you know, retaining that talent is absolutely one of the clearest returns on investment that you can demonstrate. And whilst you may feel that you pay people in your business the right amount, 45% in a recent survey felt they weren't valued by their employer. And how do you make them feel valued? You absolutely unlock their learning and development. It's the absolute key to retaining talent and making people feel valued. Yes, there are other things you can do to make your employees feel valued, and I'm not decrying, you know, looking at salaries, looking at reward packages, all of which, you know, probably subject for another presentation. But unlocking learning and development and looking where they can turn into an even greater performer and greater potential is absolutely key. Tip number 4. You need to create an engine room for this talent. So, you know, creating an engine room for your business, for talent, is what is going to drive your attraction and your retaining of talent within your business. And you need to make it your engine room, which will enable productivity, filling your skills gap, upskilling for the future, and developing strategic capabilities for the future too. So learning is the absolute key here for winning the war on talent going forward. It's about making sure that you are investing in their learning and development, and making sure that they in turn create the engine room for your business to deliver what you need. I would ask you to look at your internal and external resourcing. So I know we've got some resources on the call here, and what I'm going to say here is that if you are part of a big organisation, sometimes the resourcing department and resourcing leads aren't aligned with learning and development. You know, I've run big HR teams in the past, you know, 40, 50 plus, and I'll absolutely readily admit, sometimes in recruitment, you've got jobs that need to be filled, and that's what, you know, your recruitment teams are focusing heavily on. But learning and development are not always going, actually, well, you know, we've got some hotspots of skills that we haven't got within the organisation. What are we doing rather than recruiting people from afresh to fill those internally? So that alignment, quite often, these roles are quite siloed and not always aligned. And what I'm trying to say today is there is a strong business case for trying to source your candidates internally, because not only is it going to cause you a massive saving in terms of time and recruitment externally, but also it's absolutely key to retaining your talent. Having said all of that, there is always going to be opportunities and needs where a business needs to recruit externally. And you guys are probably a lot better qualified to talk about, those that are from recruitment departments, about how to go about recruiting. But I just think if you are going to do it, you need to do it brilliantly. And a lot of my tech clients will just put an advert on Indeed, maybe ask them to send a video in of their application process, and they think that's doing things brilliantly and differently. And whilst, yeah, it may have a certain appeal to others, I'm saying to you, you need to do something, you need to do it brilliantly if you're going to attract the best talent. And by that, what do I mean? So I was fortunate enough to spend some time at Google. I went on a number of HR best practice exchanges with Google a few years ago. And I got to spend time in their recruitment team, who are, quite frankly, absolutely out of this world. And I'm going to give you an example about how they run a jobs fair, which blew my mind, coming from, you know, a traditional industry. It blew my mind. They would go to a jobs fair. They would ask candidates to apply there and then at the graduate jobs fair. Once that application had been registered, there would be a team back office looking at all of those, doing Facebook, LinkedIn checks on these people immediately, looking at all the social media profiling. Then they would flag that back up to the front of house people at the jobs fair, and they would say, this person looks like an A+ person we want to interview. And there would be people there at the jobs fair in a different unit, there and then, ready to interview. And by the time that person had been interviewed, any other checks that had been needed to be done would have been carried out. And they used to be able to turn around offers to A+ candidates there and then at the recruitment fair. Now, you know, that for me just was doing things brilliantly, and using the resource that they had and the technical capability they had to the very best, and, you know, and speeding the process up and getting the onboarding process done within within no time at all. And I just thought that was worth saying, because I think in this, you know, relatively competitive market, and the market that's going to become greater and greater over the next 12 months, that you know, we need, if you're going to recruit, you need to do it brilliantly. So just pulling what I've said together, although there's no one size fits all to future-proof your workforce, I do believe that from the tips I've given you, a robust talent strategy, and by freeing up resources to build a learning and development culture, you will be positioned to thrive and to win the war on talent within the digital sector. Has anybody got any questions?
Yes, I do, sorry.
Yeah. Hello, who's this? Sorry.
David, I work at Walker Morris.
Oh, hello, David.
So I'm responsible for the whole recruitment for the firm. So
yeah.
The resources is simply just me and me alone.
Yeah.
So obviously Google, I imagine, has got a large resource.
They have, yeah. They have.
To manage that. So how do you what's the best way to do it? Because we run graduate fairs every year for obviously a legal intake for NQs. What's the best way to potentially streamline that? Because we get hundreds and hundreds of applications at law fairs each year.
Yeah.
And then we have to invite so many in for almost like a group assessment.
Yeah.
And that's in sections of maybe 80 to 100 split over maybe 5 days.
Yeah.
And then you invite you shortlist then potentially have to do like a week trial.
Mhm.
What I know that's not technically digital, but I'm just comparing it to potentially Google. What's the best way to potentially streamline that?
I mean, within your field, you say Walker Morris, a legal firm.
Yeah.
I mean, is this a prescribed process that is unique to Walker Morris, or is this something that you need to do legally to make sure that?
I'm not sure it needs to be done legally. I think it's just
Right.
sector driven. I think everybody does it.
Right.
And unfortunately,
So I mean, in terms of applicants, do they apply online through an electronic kind of recruitment system? Is it, how do they, or do they just submit CVs?
it's a mixture, to be honest. We attract a lot of people throughout the year, so we almost have a bank of CVs to go through if and when the time comes.
Right.
So we don't really have to do much in terms of getting the candidates there because they're already interested.
So one thing I'll say is that in my last position, I had to recruit over 1,000 people in a relatively short period of time, and and I didn't have a Google-size recruitment department to kind of do things brilliantly. But what I did do is implement an electronic recruitment system. So any applicant would have to apply online using our recruitment system. You couldn't, apply via CV. It had to be uploaded into the system, and it asked a number of knockout questions. We also embedded a number of psychometrics in there, so that they had to pass that to get put onto the shortlist, if you like. So what we did was took away any face-to-face, because obviously that's costly, and built the system. And with the numbers you're talking about, which are quite sizable, a kind of recruitment system that would help deliver a shortlisted group for you would probably save you an awful lot of time. There's probably lots of people in resourcing on this call that probably have far more exciting ideas, particularly for the digital sector. But I think everywhere you look, you should be looking to make the application process and the shortlisting process as streamlined as possible, and with less people involved, to a point where you've got the right people being delivered and being sifted, if you like, in terms of any face-to-face or in current times, I guess it's Zoom calls, in terms of any interaction, is what I'm trying to say. Would be my tip in terms of trying to make your life easier, David.
Thank you.
Was that okay? Any other questions? No problem. If anybody's got any questions, please feel free to contact me and I'll be happy to help. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.